Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia. Welcome back to another episode of our Theorycraft Thursday. For those of you who are joining us for the first time here, Theorycraft Thursday is a weekly series for the upcoming collectible card game Total War Elysium, where I will be talking about some sort of game balance or game design topic that's related to the game. This week is episode 6, and we'll be taking a look at the concept of card draws. So, card draw is something that is pretty ubiquitous to all card games. And drawing cards obviously present many advantages, so how is card draw designed in the game? How is it balanced between different factions, different eras, as well as different playstyles? But to do so, we're going to be jumping into game in the collection page to look at all the cards. Now understand that card draw is not limited to playable cards, as sometimes your generals might have certain cards in their signature kit. Perhaps you are playing Cao Cao, and you have Manipulate, which is your signature card that allows you to draw a card every turn, assuming you want to pay the 4 cost. Or sometime you might be playing as Priam, and one of your children that you can spawn during each daybreak could be Cassandra, who could end your turn with an extra card draw. But these are very unique cases and will evolve as more generals are added to the game, so I will actually not be considering those. For the main discussion here today, we'll be just looking at playable cards for each of the factions, time periods, and eras, starting with Timeless, because Timeless cards are the core to any game design since it's available for all playable generals, and there are actually only 4 card draws you can get out of Timeless. There are 5 cards here, but Mounted Brigands are actually just gaining extra attacks whenever an enemy draw a card, so it shows up in the search. Menace, Messenger, Scribe, and Join Forces are the 4 timeless draw cards. Starting out with Menace at 3 cost, we have a card that's an event card that allows you to move any targeted unit or general and allows you to draw a card. This can help you reposition or help you force the enemy to reposition in a more unfavorable spot. And it doesn't add a body onto the board, but it does give you a nice card draw. And it's often used as a finisher card for many aggro decks to force the enemy general out of position and to give you an extra draw in case you need that little bit of extra direct damage to come from your deck. Next we have Messenger. This is a flanking cavalry card that has a herald ability that only activate if you play this card on your backline. And if you do play on your backline, you get a 2/3 unit and it allows you to draw an extra card from your reserves. This is a very different concept in this game because we have our deck, which is built from our reserves during each day. And at each daybreak, we can replenish our deck with 9 additional cards from the reserve, which will refresh right after you draw it during the daybreak. Messenger here allow you to pull a card from that refreshed reserve and immediately add it into your deck. Now, at the end of your current day, at the new daybreak, that card you drew from your reserve will not be refreshed. So you're getting ahead of yourself by pulling an extra card randomly from your deck, and you have no control over what card you draw here, but this card will be in your hand rather than in your deck. And it kind of allows you to pull 10 cards from your total of 18 every single day rather than just the 9 during the daybreak. So it's a very interesting card. It does provide a lot of value, especially if you do not require a lot of combos and every card in your deck is pretty valuable, so you're just getting out extra value from your deck by playing Messenger. It also adds a nice body onto your board, although it is going to have to show up on your backline, which is its drawback. Now if you are playing a deck that features something like Open Field that allows you to move your units up when played, Messenger will kind of be the perfect complementary piece to that, as you can get your 2/3 body cavalry onto the front line, which makes it invincible to the backline range units, allowing you to have some sort of nice flanking card for the next turn. And moving on, we have the 5 cost Scribe, which is a very powerful card in my opinion. I have many decks that use this as the core card draw. And the reason why Scribe is so powerful is you're not limited to one draw. Scribe allows you to draw a card from your deck anytime you play an event card. An event card are any card that has this exclamation mark on it, and Menace is an event card, so is Join Forces. And the most typical card that Scribe will combo with would be a 0 cost extra supply catch or a 0 cost conceal that can hide the Scribe for future turns. And with the Scribe, if you can play it right, you can really help empty out your entire deck every day. So essentially you can force your opponent to play against all your cards, whereas they can only draw up to 4 of the 9 cards they draw during each daybreak. So that's a huge advantage. You're pretty much getting almost twice the amount of cards. So Scribe is very powerful, and for balance reasons, it is going to be a very weak unit at 5 cost 2/2. So you're really not using this card for any sort of damage. This is just the card you're going to be using to pump out most of your deck so that you have options from your hand. And lastly, we have Join Forces at 6 cost event card that allow you to draw a card for each unit you control. This is a great card for horde decks or decks that like to spam a lot of tokens, whether you're playing a combo deck from Dongzhuo or you're spawning tons of peasants playing as Marie Antoinette, or any other deck, maybe Sun Ren, when you have a lot of tokens being spawned, you can use Join Forces for a sudden big burst of card draw, almost as a second life, because you're playing out most of your hand and you're refreshing that with Join Forces. So it's a very powerful card in certain decks. In other decks, if you draw this card and you don't have a developed board, it could be essentially useless for you, as if you have no units, you draw no cards. So these 4 cards are the universal draw cards available to every single faction and timeline. And if we take a look at crafting just to make sure, in case I don't own any, there are none. So moving on, we can start with Empire. So Empire is an error group, as in every single new factions in the future that belongs to the Empire timeline will be able to share these cards. Currently, we only have one faction, the French Republic, who reside in the Empire timeline. So essentially this is the same as French Republic right now, but in the future, these will be shared cards. So these have slightly more power than faction exclusive cards, as faction exclusive cards like French Republic, Vikings, Troy, and Three Kingdoms can only be used by generals of their faction, whereas let's say Ancient can be shared between Troy and Three Kingdom, as both of them belong in Ancient. So, jumping to Empire, we have some of the best card draws in the game. There's only 2. Once again, we see 3 because Supply Train gives us an extra supply whenever we do draw a card. It's a very complementary piece to drawing cards, but it is not a card draw in itself, and we're not missing any cards. Now, the most powerful card draw in the game, in my opinion, is this card called Fresh Waters. You pay 3, you draw 2 cards. It's as simple and as pure as it gets, and it's the most value I believe you get out of a card draw. And nothing much to say about it. It's just a very cheap card ratio for the draw cards, and if you can combo this with Supply Train, you can see how you can get some extra supply back, and this will become a 1 cost draw 2 card type of deal. Very powerful for all Empire players, and essentially allow you to refresh most of your deck in later days. So very, very powerful card. And next up we have Crackshot. So Crackshot is another event card. It allows you to deal 5 damage to any target unit, so it can be your unit or the enemy unit. Now, most likely you want to shoot the enemy unit, and you get to draw a card. Now, 5 damage is pretty high, and essentially you'll be able to use this to trade into most 5 cost and below units, and also draw a card. So that's where the value comes in. It could be a little awkward against certain decks that doesn't feature a lot of units, but those are very rare, namely structure decks. And in most cases, Crackshot's going to give you a lot of value by helping you remove a big threat and also allowing you to draw a card on top of that. So that's all the Empire cards we have. And moving on, we have Medieval. So Medieval right now also has the same issue, as they only have Viking generals that share the same time error. So essentially these are used by the Viking generals. In the future when we get more factions, this will be given more use to other factions as well. And here, once again, we also have 2 cards, so you can see a trend here. There's some balance going on, and there's none missing. And these 2 cards are Last Stand, which is a 2 cost event card that will give a friendly unit 3 health and allow you to draw a card. Now the key here is you need to have a friendly unit. If you do not have a friendly unit, this card cannot be used. So you can't reliably use this to draw a card. But if you do have a friendly unit, this is a wonderful card, as the value you get out of this is 2 cost, draw a card, and also add 3 health to a given unit. And for a lot of the Viking medieval deck, especially if you're playing Guthrum for value, having extra health is very powerful, and you can add a lot of attack to it during your day with your signature card for a lot of different bonuses, or perhaps you could use a card that makes your attacks equal to your health, also very useful with Last Stand. So in general, this is a high value card, but you could get stuck with it if you have no units that can survive the enemy turn. Next up is Fiery, which is a structure card. This is one of the few structure cards that allow you to draw cards, and it's a 1/5 structure, so it doesn't have any range on it, so you can't actually use this to attack, and you can't force the opponent to attack this unless you play it on the front line, for example, and pull back everyone else so that they can only go through this to get to you. And what this does is whenever this gets damaged, you can draw a card if it survives. So if enemy pings it for 1 at a time, you can essentially get 4 cards out of this. That's the maximum amount of draws you can. But most likely they're going to hit it with something hard, and make sure you draw maybe just 1 card or maybe even no cards if that's the situation. Now, if you could reliably play this card on turn 4 when you have 4 supplies, perhaps you can force some unfavorable draws. But in essence, I believe your opponent will largely just ignore this card because they're not incentivized to hit it. Now, of course, you could be playing some sort of deck that you can inflict damage on yourself to force out a card draw. So that's another strategy where this could be shining, but that's also very situational. So this is not a reliable card draw by any sense, and in general I think the medieval era cards, these two here, are the least reliable, because if you compare it to Timeless and Empire has a very simple card that allows you to just draw 2, has another card that trades damage into an enemy unit, which is reliably often there, and it's very rare where the enemy has no unit, and Timeless cards are very flexible. You have all sorts of things. Now, Join Forces is probably the only one that's kind of situational, but you'd be only running those in those situational deck. So these two are the medieval cards, and we can move on to Ancient. So Ancient actually is shared between 2 different factions right now, so we do have some choices here. And Ancient has a lot of card draw options if you take a look at this. There is 4 cards here, and I'm not missing any. And we have Wandering Philosopher. This is a 0/3 unit that every time it moves or switches lanes, you can draw a card. So obviously this is great in open field decks, and you can pretty much get at least 1 draw from this card in my experience. You can always play this card in the back line, even if you don't have open field. The opponent very rarely will use something to wipe this card out of existence from your back line on the turn you play it, assuming your general's in the front line defending, and you can reliably get a draw from this card pretty easily. And if you have other movement buff, namely open field, you can probably get 2 card draws and a body from this unit. And the body's not worthless, because at worst, it can serve as flank protection on the back line, or just as a sacrificial pawn on the front line. Next up, we have a 4-cost event called Out of Position. It will stun an entire enemy line and gives you 1 extra draw. This is an excellent stun and delay card. So you essentially can stun the enemy front line, and you be free from melee attacks for the next turn, and buys you another turn and essentially 2 extra draws, because you don't have to worry about the line this turn, and you get to draw a card, and next turn they'll be still stunned, so they can't attack you, and then it'll be your turn again, and you get to draw another card. So you're kind of delaying and buying time for your whatever purpose you're designing to do, and this is an excellent card for that, and it's often taken in many decks. And moving forward, we have Triumph, which is a 6-cost unit. It's a ship, and at each daybreak, you'll be able to draw a card. So this is one of the cards that's not taken very often. I rarely see this card, if at all. And the problem mainly is the ship archetype. As you can see, ship is actually an archetype in the game. You can see it right above the star. It says ship. And the ship archetype is not flushed out yet. And if it does get flushed out in the future, maybe we'll see this more in play, because you need different cards to buff these ship cards, make them cheaper to come out, and perhaps then you might see some ship focused decks. Right now it just has very little health, because daybreak happens every 7 turns. 3 turns for opponent, 4 turns for you, or 3 turns for you, 4 turns for opponent, and then you hit daybreak. That's a long time to keep this card alive. Now, you could argue that you could play this card right before a daybreak, but the 6 cost is the problem. If this had costed 4 and was weaker, let's say it's a 4/2 and costs 4, then I think it will see more play. because at 4 cost, that's when the first day ends. So you could essentially play this onto the field right before the first daybreak. At 4 cost, you get a nice 4/2 body, not too bad, and immediately it goes into a daybreak and you can draw a card. At 6 cost, it's really awkward because the second daybreak, right before the second daybreak happened, you're at 7 or 8 cost, and playing this then just doesn't feel optimum. And you have to be able to draw this card during your second daybreak, because you're never going to be pulling this card into your first day draw because it will be too high cost. It would be a dead card in your deck during the entire first day, just to ensure that you can draw it on the second day to play it suboptimally during the end turn before the second daybreak. So there's a lot of conditions here that really works against this card in terms of design. So I feel like this card is probably not going to see play until we see more ship cards that can play into it. And lastly, we have a legendary card, the Silk Road. It is a 7 cost structure. It's 0 attack, 8 health. It's a very tanky card and very good demolition target, as you can get 7 damage to all enemy. And it's very powerful. It gives you an extra draw at the beginning of your turn. So you will draw 2 cards every turn. And whenever you play a card, you will gain back a supply. It doesn't matter what card you play. If you play Supply Catch for 0 cost, you get a free supply and another free supply from Silk Road. So this is a very powerful late game win more type of card in my opinion, because by the time you can comfortably play out Silk Road in the late game without worry about losing, you're already winning really, really hard. And it's going to guarantee you to win more because you'll be able to draw more cards, force the opponent to remove something that's very difficult, potentially having a demolition target, and also just giving you a ton of supplies so you can play more cards than the opponent during your turn. It's just a very unfair card if you're able to keep it on your board. So it's very strong. Potentially this would be a good target in structure decks, or even if you're running some sort of supply catch deck. So if you're running that scribe combo, this could be very powerful as a 7 cost play, because essentially you can spend all your supplies, play the Silk Road, and you can still play other things that turn, because once you play Silk Road and you have a bunch of supply catches in your hand, whether you got them through Vineyard or other means, you can start playing those, and each of those will be worth 2 supply back to you. And whatever card you want to play that turn additionally to this Silk Road, you can play those and they will give you a supply back discount as well, and you can potentially dump your hand onto the field if you have enough supply catches saved up, maybe even 2. Because think about it, if you have 2 saved up, you get 4 supplies back. Play something that costs, let's say 3, you get another one back, you have 2 again. You play something that costs 2, you have another one again, you can play something that costs 1. So essentially you could end up playing another 6 supply of value after this card. It's not too hard to imagine saving up 2 supply catches, especially if you're playing someone like Dong Zhuo, who gets 1 during each daybreak, and then by the time you can play a 7 cost card, you'll be at least through 1 daybreak. So it definitely has a place, and it's actually quite powerful. So definitely a worthy legendary card to have. And moving on, that's all the errors. We can now revisit them in the factions. We'll start with the ancient factions. We'll go reverse order because we just talked about the ancient card draws. So while that's fresh on our mind, we'll talk about the 3 kingdoms. So 3 kingdoms also only has 2 card draws, which is not too bad because there are 4 shared ancient time draws. But the 3 kingdoms draws are very suboptimal. So first we have the court eunuch. The court eunuch is a 1 cost 1/2 unit, and it has a mandate power. So mandate, what it does is whenever you play a targeted ability, targeted event, targeted unit that has some sort of trigger, and you target this card. So maybe you play Z infantry and it adds 1 health to one of your unit, and you target that effect on the court eunuch, then that's considered a mandate. So whenever you mandate onto court eunuch, your own court eunuch will attack your own general. Now the reason for this, the design reason and the lore reason, is because in the 3 kingdoms, the entire mess and the downfall of the Han Dynasty came from the fact that eunuchs in the court corrupted the emperor and caused this downfall that triggered the fracture of the kingdom into 3 kingdoms. So that's why the eunuch's attacking your own general, but after the attack, it will allow you to draw a card. So it's giving you a little bit of benefit, but you have to do many things to trigger this card draw. You will have to buff it or somehow send an effect targeting at it, so you have to use another card on it. You can't get around that. You have to target it with another card. And once you target it with another card, you have to use this card to take damage from it. So if you buff its damage, you take more damage. If you buff its health, this thing will stay along longer. But there's some cool effects here that's not intentional, but might become intentional, because I did bring this up. I brought up the question of what happens when your court eunuch attacks Sun Ren and gets killed. So the reason why this is a question is if we come to Sun Ren has ability in that whenever this kills an enemy in your turn, deploy a Sun attendant. So it says pretty clearly kill an enemy, but the design of the game doesn't actually check that. So if it's your turn, which it will be when you are boosting your eunuch, your court eunuch, let's say 1-2 health, you boost it attack by 1. And for Sun Ren, let's say we put on draw blade, which would increase our attack by 1. So we'll be at 220. The court eunuch will be 2-2. It will clash into Sun Ren, get killed, and you will draw a card because it attacked Sun Ren, and you also spawn a Sun attendant. So there's some potential value here. And after talking to the designer, I think they said they will keep it as is because it feels very interesting combo. Right now, this is the only type combo where your own card can attack Sun Ren. So this might be a loophole. They said they might just change the wording here to say whenever this kills a unit in your turn. And that could be a potential archetype for the future. Who knows? But that would be a good value, right? You paid 1 for the court eunuch. You paid, let's say 2 for the Saber Militia that buffed it to 2-1. The Saber Militia will still be on the field. It'll be a 3-1. And the 2-2 eunuch attacked your general. It got killed. You had to pay 1 on Sun Ren for the draw blade, but you probably have to do it anyways to attack an enemy. So that's not really a cost. And then you get a 1-3 2-action Sun attendant instead of your eunuch, and you drew a card. So I think there's some value there that you can exploit. And maybe your eunuch was able to tank out 1 damage on the turn before it was used. So there's potential value here to make that happen with Sun Ren. And that's one of the cool things that we have discovered. And going back, we have another card in the Three Kingdoms, Tiger and Leopard Cavalry, the private elite cavalry group of Cao Cao. And it has a flanking ability. It's an 8 cost 7/7 cavalry. It's quite strong. Most cavalry are buffed, considering that Caltrop no longer can kill any cavalry, can only do 4 damage at max. So these late game cavalry with high health and high damage just becomes immensely more powerful. The problem here is the ability. You can't just draw any card here. It's whenever you target another ally, which happens a lot for Three Kingdoms cards as mandate is the key keyword. So you do target a lot of allies. And when you do that, you can draw a cavalry from your deck. So it's a passive ability. You just have to have Tiger and Leopard on the field. And whenever you do a targeting on an ally, you get to draw something from your deck. And it has to be a cavalry. So you have to run some more cavalries in your deck, or maybe just run more Tiger and Leopards. I think it's powerful if you get it started, but given the high cost of Tiger and Leopards, and the fact that you need other cavalries currently in your deck, as well as a targeting card, as well as another ally. You can't target Tiger and Leopard because it says another ally, so you can't be your only card. There's a ton of restrictions here. So it's not the greatest card draw, so both of these cards actually see very little play in Three Kingdoms deck, and Three Kingdom decks in general have to rely entirely on the ancient and timeless card draws for their card draws. But that's also another design issue because Cao Cao has very reliable card draw from his signature card, but Dong Zhuo and Sun Ren does not. So Sun Ren has to play kind of this token style and use stuff like drawing forces to pump out a bunch of cards. Dong Zhuo had to do the same thing, or potentially he can use the fact that his character can spawn supply catchers during every daybreak and use that instead with a scribe combo to kind of pump out the deck. So both of those are possible, and we definitely showcase how Dong Zhuo can do that in one of our deck showcases way back. So that's enough about Three Kingdoms. Let's move on to the newest faction in the game, Troy. And Troy conversely have some of the best card draws in my opinion in the game. So first card draw is Man the Walls. You can give this to any friendly structure, that structure will become short range and you can draw a card. So this obviously belongs in a structure deck, so we're talking about Priam here, and you want to give this to your structures anyway that you have buffed up and now they can attack on the enemy, and you get to draw a card, all for 2 cost. So if you don't have a structure deck, don't bring this card, and if you do, this is a wonderful card draw for you. And the other card here is Funeral Games. So this is an example of these super high value cards. So Funeral Game costs 9, so definitely a late game card, but it's an event card and has Heroic. So Heroic means you have to play this on empty lane. So the easiest target for empty lane in the game is Agamemnon here. So usually for Agamemnon decks, because you can move your leader freely, this is always run for the late game card draw, because you'll be out of cards in the late game. You play this, at worst you get 2 5 cost 4/4 flanking extra action cavalry card in the chariot, and at best you get those 2 plus you draw 2 new cards from your deck. So could be very insane with this card. That's a ton of value. So you're getting about 3 cost of value for draw 2 cards if you're comparing Freshwater, which is a good baseline, and then you get additional 10 value for the chariot. So you're getting about 13 supplies of value for 9 cost, and chariots are hard to deal with. Sure, the new Caltrop can still kill them, but you have 2 of them here, so that's a headache, and that's where this card really shines. And you can get one every Daybreak because it's just a common card, which is pretty insane in the late game as well, because at that point even Caltrops can't keep up with you because you can only draw 1 of those every Daybreak, and you can't match up with Funeral Games. So very powerful card draws for the Trojan factions. There are no other ones. And then moving on, we go to Vikings, which is actually where I'm lacking a little bit in terms of card draw. You think there's 2, very balanced design, but in fact there's another one. There's a legendary one called Saga that gives you the ability to draw 3 cards for 7 cost, but it has raid. So for every single injured unit on the field, friendly or foe, you'll be able to reduce this card cost by 1. So essentially this could be almost free if there are 7 injured units on the field or structures, and you can draw 3 cards. Pretty situational, but if you're playing Lagatha, getting injured cards very common, and even if you're not, you can play something like a big board with Guthrum, and you can shower yourself with Blot Out the Sun, and then Saga for free. It's pretty straightforward. That's why it's legendary. And I am not going to craft this card, so it doesn't fit my playstyle very often. And the other 2 card draws, which are both excellent. First is Dawn Raid. If you've seen the latest Lagatha Look Ma No Hand deck showcase last week, then you've seen Dawn Raid in action. This is how you empty out your hand playing as Lagatha, just high value. You not only get to draw a card for 2 cost, which by itself, I feel like it's decent enough value, right? If it costs 3 to draw 2, costing 2 to draw 1, it's right about there. And then your hand would also cost 1 less this turn. It means every single card in your hand after you draw that new card get reduced by 1 cost. That makes this card like auto include in every single Viking deck and auto taken during every day. You want this card every single day. There is not a day where this card is bad. You can get an extra card, you make everything else cheaper by 1. So you'll always have your signature card during your turn, right? So you at least have 1 card in your hand. And in the case where you have only 1 card, right? Your empty deck, you have no hand, not empty deck, you have no hand, and you just have your signature card. You have Dawn Raid as your top deck. Even in that situation, you play Dawn Raid, your signature card gets reduced by 1. The new card you get drawn reduced by 1. So Dawn Raid is free. So there's no situation where Dawn Raid is bad. It's essentially a free card draw. And it could be immense supply value. Imagine you have a hand that's like 5-6 cards. So you pay 2 to draw a new card, and then 5-6 cards become reduced by 1 cost. That's how strong Dawn Raid is. So this card is hands down the best card draw in the game, and it's available for Vikings. And this kind of makes up for the fact that we talked about how the Vikings medieval card draws, the Friary and the Last Stand, are both highly situational. So it balances out a little bit because we do have Dawn Raid. And then you have Longship. So Longship has Raid. It costs a lot right now. It costs 5, but with Raid it could cost lot less. And it's a 3/2 unit, and you get to shatter, draw a card. Means when this die, you get to draw a card. So that's pretty decent. Once again, ship is at a very awkward place where they don't have enough ship cards to let you build a ship deck. But I'm pretty sure in the future, when we do have enough ship cards, we can probably see Longship shine a bit more, because right now, after the nerf, it used to be 4 cost, and that's when I kind of took this card into my decks. At 5 cost, I shied away from this a little bit, because you don't get this card draw until much later, and you also don't have control over this card draw, which sometimes is quite scary, because when you're playing as Vikings, you have a card called Warmonger and other cards that can help, like Hungarian. There's another card that can help you empty your hand. So if their opponent can have a say in when you draw this card, they can have a say in when you empty your hand. So essentially they could get you to do all your draws and then kill off your Warmonger, and you lose every single one of those draws. So there's some counterplay to this, which is why I'm kind of shying away from including this in any of the decks. So that's all the Vikings, and lastly we're on to the French Republic. You see there's only one card here, and there is only one card here. Not gonna lie, you have Extraordinary Advance. Not only is it only one card, this card is only good if you have a planned card in your deck. If you play this card without keeping track of what planned card you have in your deck, you could just be wasting this card. Because if you can play anytime you want, the game doesn't stop you. And once you play it, if you have no planned card in your deck, you just wasted 2 supplies. But if you do have a planned card, and there's tons of planned card in the game, I'm not going to show it. So French keyword is planned, means it has a different effect when it's planned, and you can plan normally by waiting it through a daybreak. So when a daybreak happens, if that card is sitting in your hand, then it becomes planned. Or you can use Extraordinary Advance. It will pull the card from your deck into your hand, and it will automatically become planned, which is quite powerful because some of the extra planned attacks or planned effects are quite good. So maybe we should show it, because we've been talking about planned a lot. So let's take a look. National Guard, you get +1 attack if this is not a planned card. Never mind. You get +1 attack if you have a planned card in your hand. So potentially, let's say you have this on the field. It's a 1/2 short range. You play Extraordinary Advance on your first day when nothing could be technically planned, and you pulled out a card and gave it plan. You suddenly have a 2/2. So you get 1 attack worth of value here. Calibrated Ordnance, which is a very common card, it's 3 damage. If planned, you get an extra round shot, which is an extra damage. So that has been nerfed. It used to be 2 round shot, which was great value. Now it's slightly less value, because the plan of having 1 extra damage for 1 supply is not that attractive. Having plan Enrage allow you to deploy a peasantry right away versus when it moves. They're essentially getting a 0 cost extra unit worth of value. It is still extra unit, so there's still some value in it. Deploy extra Citizen Soldier, which is a 1 cost value, having ability to deal 2 damage to any target. This is actually pretty strong in terms of value added, because you're essentially paying these 2 for that value. And then you have giving your peasants +1/+1 whenever enemy attacks your general. This also attacks it if they have planned card in your hand, similar to National Guards. This is the old guard. There's some very nice card art references in the game as well, where you have like a young guard to an old guard type of situation. I can show you guys another one later, but this is another case such as that, where you see them going out as National Guards, all pretty, veterans now injured, and you can do the similar effect. And this is a legendary card here, being the old guard. And they have Grand Battery, which is very oppressive. You get 1 extra cannon instead of 2, and cannons are worth 5, so that's a lot of value there. And there's a couple more. Oh, here, there's the card art that I was talking about, the young guard. So this is the young guard, and then you have the old guard, and they have other artwork like that. But that's pretty much our discussion about card draws. If we're curious about artworks, let's see. I think there's a new recruit. There's a new recruit card. Wait. Maybe I should search new instead of search 2 things. So this is new recruit, right? We're drilling some new recruits. And I believe there's a veteran card. Veteran trainer. No, it should be in Timeless. I'll find it. There's very nice call cards between decks. Oh, it's new recruit plus well drilled. So it's the same lineup, but now they're seasoned. And that's kind of the references in between card arts. And those are the cute minor details in this game as well. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Rather short discussion about card draws. I feel like it's pretty essential to have some card draws in your game because you start out with 3 draws at the first turn and then just 1 card per turn, and you are refreshing your deck all the time, which means your probability of drawing the cards you want decreases significantly with each daybreak. So if you want to consistently get your combos or powerful cards out, you need some card draws to balance it out. You can think of it this way. You're adding 9 cards to your deck every day, but you can only draw out 4 of those. So if you want to more consistently perform with the deck that you have built, you want to be able to add at least 2 card draw per day, in my opinion, to your deck so that you have more consistency, as you can draw out about 2/3 of your new deck addition each time. So hope you guys enjoy this one, and we'll see you guys in the deck showcase later this week. Until then, bye!